Well, let's kick things off for WTF Wednesdays. What the function? We have Mr. Brian Guenther with Exceed Cybersecurity, and how you doing today, Brian?
I'm great, thanks.
It's good to have you here. We're going to talk about something that we just will never stop talking about, and that's cybersecurity and compliance. And I guess the topic today that is so critical is, having conversations with our clients, getting them to embrace cybersecurity. Um, we just last week were having conversations. In fact, I think Jay might have even been part of that, where we're talking about how clients run into cybersecurity issues and even if you get hit with something like that, you don't, some don't truly embrace it. We've always said, once somebody gets hit by some type of a cybersecurity incident, that's when they take things seriously. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, right? I mean, we run into situations where people are gluttons for punishment, and even if they get zapped, they'll do the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing, expecting different results, right? So, with that being said, Brian, I want to have you give us an overview of yourself before we jump into our topic here today.
Well, I'm 52. I'm an Aquarius, and I'm just kidding. No, well,
Who likes long walks on the beach.
that's right. That's right.
Right.
Jay
Yeah.
knows. Um, so a little bit about me. I've been in this industry coming up on almost 30 years, which is hard to believe. Started off like a lot of us here on this call, right? As far as like starting off with desktop support, working my way up into systems engineering and network administration, and then ultimately sort of starting my own business about, geez, over 20 years ago now. And that gone through various iterations, a couple of which was with business partners, which I'll never do again. However, learned a lot, right? Learned a lot in that process. And a few years back, decided to really pivot more heavily into the cyberspace, the cyber side of the house, and helping people identify and assess, identify, manage their risk. Right. That was really probably about 4 or 5 years ago. Is really when I just said, you know what, this is where I want to be, and I've really more over time, slowly but surely, sort of broken down, even though it still says, right, cybersecurity and IT, and it says on my shirt as well. But that IT services are really falling away. We're not even offering that anymore to new clients now. We're actually just really only offering cybersecurity services, what I call defensive cyber, right? Essentially having a cybersecurity program where your information security risk management is really what it is. And it's part of the risk management strategy and helping with compliance as well. We are heavily into the CMMC space. So for those of you who are not familiar with that, I've talked about this on this show before. A cybersecurity maturity model certification, which is what defense contractors have to abide by. That is going to be completely and fully done, expected now in 3 months. The second of two major regulations supposed to be dropping. And once that's done, there's no turning back. It's very clear the DoD is moving forward with that. So we're cybersecurity risk managers, defense cybersecurity risk managers, and compliance folks. That's really what we do. And we partner with MSPs, by the way, because we're not competitive.
Excellent. And so let's jump right into our topic. I'm going to have Brian kick things off here, and then please feel free. Any questions that you have, don't be shy. Just feel free to jump in, and we'll be happy to answer those as we go along. So with that said, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Brian.
Sure. So the question is really, how do you get customers to take security seriously? Really, that's the question, right? Um, is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure I understand the
I
task
just
at
don't
hand.
know if there's an actual answer.
Well, I'm not saying that I'm going to have the answer myself, but I'll give you whatever I can give you, right? And so I hope I didn't mess with your spotlight there. I just don't like to see myself when I talk. Is that okay? Are we good?
No, you're good. You're
Okay,
good.
cool. Very good. So all right, so I'll tell you kind of like my approach to this. First of all, I think it's super important to have a conversation with your customers, right? With your clients, right? Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's a relationship. You're delivering certain widgets and services that they rely upon, right? And that may be, doing help desk and supporting their laptops, their computers, their network, their email, website, whatever. All those pieces that revolve around that, right? And standard MSP stuff. But it's important to have a conversation with these decision makers to make sure you're explaining that you are not their risk manager, certainly the current iteration of your relationship, right? That's a very different role. And unless you have that conversation with them and share with them, like, look, that's not what we do for you today under our current agreement, even though you may think, based on what they may have told you, you think that we may be doing that, we're not. Those are very different disciplines and processes and functions. Okay. And there's also different requirements behind that, right? Training skills, capabilities, certain certifications, tooling specifically, right? As well. That's part of it. Policies and procedures. Those are things, by the way, Mr. Customer, we've never done for you. And that's a different type of engagement. Now, whether you feel comfortable yourself as an MSP engaging in that relationship and stepping that up, and having another statement of work where you can deliver those services, helping identify and ultimately manage their risk, that I can't answer for you because I don't know your business and what you can do, right? But it starts there. It starts with the conversation around, look, this is not what we're doing for you today. Another place where I've seen a lot of MSPs, forgive the term, but go sideways a little bit, is when they start trying to deliver point solutions and saying, hey, we got to put an MFA, NGAV, or EDR, MXDR, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 things, and that'll improve your posture, your cybersecurity posture. But is it really enough? Right? And you got to sort of look inward and say, is that enough for my clients to really ideally be protected? And am I really trying to help them holistically as a cybersecurity, a defensive program, or am I really just trying to add a little bit more MRR to my pocket? What is it? Okay, so I'll pause there.
Anybody want to jump in at that point? Anybody have any questions? Mike, it looks like you might. There we go.
From what he's saying, that sounds exactly like a younger startup in my area that I think is just listening to vendors about adding MMR and offering security. And he doesn't have any gray hair, okay? And it's because he has about 3 years of IT experience. But he's trying to posture himself as a cybersecurity expert. And that's kind of concerning to me, because it's like, until you've done all these things, how do you know? So I get what you're saying. I think there's a lot of vendors out there that are going to people that are, I don't want to say impressionable, but saying, hey, offer this to your clients, and by the way, it'll really pad your bottom line. And
yeah,
they're out there doing it.
And I wish that weren't the case, right? I mean, look, I like a good vendor just like everyone else here does, right? But does it fit into my overall strategy? Does it fit into how I'm trying to protect the organization? And the thing about cybersecurity, you have to understand most of anything, and I'm sure many of you here on this call know this, it's not about the tooling, it's not about the controls. It's really about the policies and procedures. Have you defined what your rules are in your organization around a BYOD policy, a remote access policy, right? I mean, all those different, you can think of 20 or 30 different policies that really have to be part of a written information security plan, a WISP. If you've heard that term before, right? If your clients don't have WISPs right now, that's really kind of like your client's Bible around how they're dealing with information security. So you really have to begin there and say, look, if this isn't in place today, put on your sort of vCISO hat, even if you just play one on TV, put it on temporarily and say, you know what, we got to make sure we hire somebody or get you a WISP, even if we write it for you from scratch, or we template it, and just be aware those have to be adjusted for the customer. You can't just like grab and replace and stick it in place, right? It's got to be reviewed and it has to be signed off on by their leadership. Because again, policies, I haven't said this, sorry, I shouldn't say again. Policies are really the law that foundationally underpin what you say you're going to do. What's okay, what's not okay, what's expected, what's not expected, right? Here's what we do in this event. Do you have an incident response plan, an IRP? That's part of your WISP. Do you have that? What happens if you get popped? Those things are really foundational to that conversation that you have to start talking to your client about, saying, look, we got to begin here. But first of all, they have to take the responsibility themselves and say, I am vulnerable. I have holes in my business, sort of the soft underbelly that's unprotected. And part of your job is to point that out, right? Because if you don't, whether it's third-party stories or case studies or use cases, whatever they may be, they're going to go on thinking that you are the guy that protects them from the bad guys. And guess what? If you're the IT guy and they get popped, they're going to be like, it's your fault. Do you want to be that guy that's caught in the blast radius? I don't. It makes sense?
You know, and I was
Yeah.
thinking too, first off, I want to say, Mike, you're so exactly right as far as the gray hair or the bald head, because I think that shows a lot as far as, we've been in the industry long enough, right? But the other thing I would say too is our level of confidence when we are going in there, our ability to not waver from what is right and what is wrong shows a lot. There are going to be competitors out there that, when they're in there, there's going to be well, you could do that, sure, that's okay, and there's this lack of confidence in more to, I guess, to cater to what maybe the end user wants to hear. And that is not our job. We need to stand firm. We need to be tactful, but we need to stand firm, what needs to be done and why it needs to be done.
That's so crucial because remember, even though let's just say someone's in this room today, right, virtually or whichever, right? We're all virtually here except for Dan. He's in his house recording, or sorry, in his studio, I should say.
Yeah,
Um, it's important to understand that you know more than they do. You may feel like I don't know shit about cyber, right? And you may feel that today, right? But you know a hell of a lot more than they do. Let's just start with that. Okay.
yeah,
And understanding that you can provide value and further helping them protect their business when it happens, not if it happens, right? We'll get back to
right.
sort of the people that don't learn in a little bit. We'll kind of table that for now. But you have to have that conversation first, because I think most people are willing to have that conversation, and you have to make it very clear. We have to have again, a sort of your foundation is cybersecurity. Even the federal government, the DoD, again, we're talking about CMMC here. Sorry, a little shameless plug. But if we're talking about that, even the federal government, they say cybersecurity is the foundation upon which this house is built. That is no longer can be exchanged for anything else or excuses, right? That has to be there. And you have to make a decision, especially if you have somebody who's reckless, a client who's reckless and does really stupid shit, insists on having admin rights, wants to install whatever software they want, wants to have no controls, no app whitelisting, just all the bad stuff, right? And since it's called WTF, I'm not going to throw an F bomb, right? But I know it's what the function. But but they need to understand that it's their business risk. And part of that is to convey that to them, have an honest conversation, but convey it to them to where they know we don't do this for you today. Here's what's needed to kind of dial you in. And let's start with something because I believe something is better than nothing. But they have to take responsibility that it's their business risk. And I would strongly recommend that if they're not receptive to that conversation, don't want to hear it, don't want to meet with you, whatever it might be, make sure that there is a risk acceptance letter that gets generated and ideally they sign. Because that implication or that, what's the best way to frame this? The presenting a risk acceptance letter they ask someone to sign can be a wake-up call for them. And
We've
it's not to bend
actually,
them over barrel, but just
we've
FYI.
actually, um, we've hashed this out with a lawyer before, and Brad Gross, you may have heard of him, and his recommendation is to send the letter, but don't leave a signature option because what if they don't sign?
What if they don't sign? And
So
that's something we've discussed as well. So good point, Fred. Thank you for bringing that up. You're right because it's essentially a risk acceptance notification is really what it is. If you make them sign, they can choose not to, or they can claim I didn't receive it or whatever. Right? They can kind of screw you over with that. But if you deliver it in such a way that's irrefutable that that has been done, it may be the step you need, and that could be the step, one of many steps in saying I need to separate from them because the risk to my MSP is too great to keep working with them.
yeah,
Because when they get popped, you are in the blast radius, 100%.
I've done that, and I use the story from the Pumpkin Plan where the guy offered a lawyer, legal client, um, backups, and they said, "Oh no, our staff's been doing that for years. We're going to continue to do that." And so he put on the quote for all the rest of the services a line item saying customer declined it and had him initial it. And then it happened, server failed, no working backups. They called a meeting. He shows up with his ace in the hole contract where they signed off on it. And when they bring it up, he says, look, here it is, you signed it. And the lawyer looks back at him and says, well, you're the expert, you should have insisted. And
Yeah.
so
But it depends on, I mean, depends on whether this is going to go to court or not, right? Because a lot of things don't go to court, right? Most things are settled out of court. But to your point,
right. Yeah, so I use that example and say, okay, this has to be done. Like, we can't service you unless we're doing this. And
right.
I'll even say, like, my insurance won't cover me to be supporting a business that's doing this.
And honestly, that's a great way to do it, is sort of say, they won't let me. Your blame, even if that's not 100% true, but think about that. That's a good sort of like blame the third party, right?
Yep. And I've done it, and I've had clients, you know, that we've parted ways and didn't miss them.
And again, those folks, think about that, right? Those people that are very lackadaisical about this approach of securing their own company, it's their business, it's their risk. But keep in mind, if you do nothing about this and don't have a paper wall, having really, really good contracts is crucial. And this is in no way a pitch, by the way, but about a year and a half ago, I signed up with a company. They're called Scott and Scott LLP. They're based out of DFW. And they are a SaaS and MSP only law firm, and they have a whole cadre, a whole stack. They're called Monjur, Monjur. Again, I'm not a pitch man.
Oh yeah.
But I
They were
use
at ASCII in Jersey last month.
They're in the circuit, absolutely. They're all over these shows, and they're on the big shows. I'm sure they're going to Kaseya Connect and all those, right? However, I signed up with them. And once I did that, I had a really solid stack. That was like the last hole in my donut, is having a really good, what I've learned, and this is not a term I made up, but learned is what's called a paper wall. You've got to protect yourself, and like, you know, limitation of liability, indemnification. All of these pieces are critical in addition to the things you do to protect yourself from getting, again, pulled into the blast radius of your client and limiting your own liability and your exposure.
We had a client that had been with us for probably a good 12 or 13 years, and they had gone through leadership changes over the period of time, and everything seemed to work out well. This last time around, the CEO and the CFO were replaced. They had worked together. We knew that they were going to let their contract ride out and replace us. And I was never more happy the way that it landed, because there were so many red flags during the process of having discussions with CEO and the CFO, where they were very upset the fact that they could not have admin rights. They expressed how they know better.
Yeah.
They were also shocked why we had a managed firewall in place when Comcast device is sufficient for them.
Yeah.
And so, those type of situations where, yeah, there are some scenarios where you can alter the conversation and you can get them, to be on the right page. In this case, it was very clear it wasn't going to be the case, and they knew, they had their minds made up. And so the fact that they exited on their own accord made it very easy for us. And it was disappointing to have such a client, for being with us so long, 12, 13 years. And they had a good sized staff, probably 30, 35 employees. And so we've built relationships with so many people. And so it was, when you build those relationships and you know that you're exiting and they're going to be moving on to someone else, it's disappointing just because, you've invested so much over the years.
But there's a silver lining here, though, Dan. The silver lining is if you have a strong relationship and they exit on their own terms, and then, you have a reason that you come to a fork in the road, they choose the other fork. It's not you, right? My sense is if you're a gentleman, if you're professional, if you're communicative, you give them everything that's needed, you help the other MSP, again, treat the way you'd want to be treated, right? And if you help them offboard you or them properly to the new MSP, you do all those things, and you're really a good person and do things the right way, you're preserving the goodwill that you've continued, even though they may have left for other reasons, right? They don't want to implement security measures, or their costs have gone up too far. They're going to now get in bed with someone else who's an unproven entity, right? And I've
Yep.
seen it many, many times in this industry where I know a lot of people in this industry. I mean, I probably know 250, 300 MSP owners. I know a ton like you, right? We know a lot of people. I've heard time and again where people have come back and said, you know what, we screwed up. We thought it would be better. But usually what it is, it's typically poor communication and a lapse in service that brings them back, right? We didn't know how good
Yeah.
we had it. Even though we know you charge more, will you take us back? And
And
don't burn bridges. Whatever you do,
yeah.
do not burn bridges. Don't blow that shit up behind your bridge or the River Kwai. Throw a couple of grenades behind you as you're storming out the door.
Yep.
That's dumb.
Because even if they don't come back, what's most important to me is that I know deep inside that we did the right thing and we
Yep,
handled it appropriately. And I
exactly.
mean, that's just part of your character. And you know
Yes.
that, your character comes out. So, other people can see your character and, no matter how you think about it, I mean, it's all you're building yourself, you're building who you are, what your organization means, and your staff sees that. So a lot of the other decisions that are being made in the how they handle the relationship, because the team is only as good as its leader. So if it comes from the top down and others see, oh, they didn't really care about that customer, so maybe I shouldn't care about that, other customers, and you don't want that to be the case.
You have to
100%.
exhibit basic integrity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. I mean, treat others the way you want to be treated, right? Like you said, it's character, and I am a character. I'll tell you that. Just ask my wife, right? Um, but I mean, it really does come down to your character. Are you going to be a good person, treat people right? And if they have the reasons for leaving, leave. And again, even if they don't come back, but just don't burn bridges. Just be a decent person.
Yeah. And Jay, I don't recall if it was you, and obviously, certainly not asking you for to get into any specifics, but I think we were talking in the last week or two about how uh, a client will have some type of a incident, but no matter what, even in that case, they don't embrace the conversations that you're having with them.
Yeah.
You mind sharing a little more about
I
that?
I had one get fished for 300 grand. All right. And even after that, still can't get him to do the security awareness training.
Yeah.
Like, if you guys all did this, it might not have happened. Oh, we're busy.
Mhm.
So,
Let
so
me ask you a question. Did you ask them just curious, what were to happen to you? So 300K, just to be clear, that went out the door, never came back. Is that
Yep.
right? That's
Yep.
lost, right? Okay.
Gone.
So I would say it sounds like they've got money to burn. I
You do
mean,
make a lot of money.
you make a lot of money, you have money to burn, you can lose that money and it not scare you. So that to me says something about you as a person. Maybe you don't want to be told what to do. It's all on your own terms. And we've all had customers like that know better than everyone else, right? There's a subject matter in everything that they hire out for.
Yeah, well, it's not so much that they were claiming that they knew better or anything. It's just they're too busy. They don't see it really being a benefit.
Well, could you prove that how they came in? But it was phishing, right? So it came
Yeah,
through, it was their weakest link, which is their people,
right.
right? It was phishing. So when you just curious again, I don't know what you said, so I'm just wondering when you had that conversation, was it just that they weren't concerned about that happening again? Was there any concern at all, or there was none? There was just
I
a
mean, they didn't like that it happened,
Mhm.
but it wasn't going to put them out of business. And they figured they got enough other stuff going on, suck it up and get more work done. It's my impression anyway.
So good question from Norm. Now they didn't pay a ransom, right? So in other words, they were
No,
fished. Okay, so
no, they wired
it was wire
money.
fraud, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it was a wire fraud thing. And I mean, there's something I learned many, many years ago. Some of you may be familiar with the Sandler sales system, right? Have you ever heard of that before, right? Essentially a
Mm.
mechanism by which you learn how to sell, sort of selling through not selling. Um, and there's this concept that came from David Sandler many decades ago that's all about people have to be in pain, right? The pain is the reason for doing business or making a change. And if somebody doesn't have enough pain, they're not going to change how they act today, right? And so your client here, Jay, in this case, lost 300K. To me, that would be a huge deal. Oh my God, right? For you too,
Yeah.
probably, for most of us. But to them, it's not, because they didn't feel that pain enough. Now, if it's 3 million, would that have been enough? Is there a number that's high enough? And I would go back and say, look, I was thinking about this. What's the guy's first name, by the way, your client?
Peter.
Peter, to say, hey, Peter, look, can I sit down with you? I'd like to have a quick conversation. 5, 10 minutes. Is that okay? Great. Get together in person if you can, to say, look, I've been thinking about this. And it really bothers me that this happened to you, to your organization. And big part of what we do is we help clients protect themselves. And my question is, if this happened again, what would that mean to you? And let them answer that question, right? Okay, well, it wouldn't be great, but okay, well, what if it were 3 million or $1 million? What would that mean? And kind of put him into that frame of mind, sort of future casting almost. If this happened to you as $1 million or $2 million, what would that mean to your business? What would that mean to you personally? And let it hang, because they need to answer. Don't save them. Don't rescue them. But you've got to kind of make it personal at some point, but asking good questions and getting their input. Does this matter to you? If it doesn't, part of the decision also in this case would be, I'd say, sorry, his first name again was what?
Peter.
Peter, thank you. So in this case, be like, hey, Peter, listen, I've got some real concerns here. This could not be financial. It may even be worse. We have major reputation damage that can take your business down. They could steal, ransom, and then potentially extort you and put your data on the dark web. That could potentially put you out of business. If that happened, what would that mean to you? And just sort of, again, put it right in front of them. I would say something like that, because ultimately I want him to elucidate to me that there's enough pain. And if there isn't ever going to be enough pain, they're not going to change.
So
I
instead
can
of
share a
being,
similar. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, go right ahead.
I was going to say, I can share a similar story to an old client I had in an older MSP. And now, unfortunately, this older MSP is one that was more of a VAR, more of a break fix, didn't really care about the cybersecurity side, but it still boggled me how poorly the client decided on not just security, but operational. Their backups was a NAS device hooked to the office manager's PC.
Of course.
That was it. That was, the whole backups for the entire company. The email that they used was still the POP email provided by their internet service provider, not Microsoft 365. So everyone's still running off of PST or OST files, like stored on the computer, not backed up. So every time I would go there, it didn't matter like what ticket I was working. I would, sit down with the ops manager and say, hey, we have to have a conversation about the risk. Like, this isn't a good setup. And like, you kind of pled the case, and every time it's like, oh, we'll be fine, nothing's happened or whatever. And I'm like, well, when it does happen, like, what are you going to do? Oh, we'll be fine. So inevitably, the office manager clicked the phishing email, and thankfully, she didn't put her information in. It went to one, but she still wanted me to check it out. And I look at her and I'm like, you understand how lucky you just got? She's like, what do you mean? I was like, your machine is the one that has the backups. Like, that could have been it right there. If you put in your credentials, your company would have been, there's a good possibility that that would have been it. And still was like, no, that's okay. I learned my lesson. I won't happen again.
Yeah.
3 weeks later, I get the call. Guess what? I clicked another one. Still didn't do anything. A few months later, one of the people that did the designs, because they worked on like installations for fire suppression, and one of the person's PST files got corrupted, lost all of his email. There's no backup. Like, try to do what you can, but there's not much you can do. And tell the guy like, hey, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. Your email is lost. And of course, that guy like blew his top. He was pissed. Like, he's like, what the hell do you? There's nothing you can do. And I'm like, I'm sorry, there is no backups due to decisions that are made by your company. Like, we've recommended it. And normally I don't go the route of throwing somebody under the bus, but like, I didn't know what else to tell him at that point. It was like ridiculous. They didn't get rid of their POP email until the ISP told them, hey, we're we don't want to do email anymore. You're going to have to migrate to another system. They were given a 6 month heads up. They didn't do anything about it until their email was shut off and stopped working. And then, of course, it became an emergency. And thankfully, I wasn't there at that time when it happened. But I guess
Yeah.
moral of the story, in my opinion, unless you have other advice on that, just some clients just won't get it. And if I had any say, really, or more say
Yeah.
at that MSP, I definitely would have been a dropped client.
Yeah. And so you're exactly right. I'll kind of reframe what you just said. Some clients just don't get it. They could literally have a loss, like Jay talked about his client Peter, or you just talked about a second ago, and they still won't get it because making a change, which they see as part of their work culture, right? And whether it's the owner, because again, let's just be honest, the good stuff and the bad stuff flows downhill, right? You have a good owner, good leader that's going to have a strong culture and take good care of his people and be protective of his company and sort of make sure that everyone's empowered to do their work. The leaders we all want to work for, right? And the clients we want to work for, honestly. And we see the inverse of that happening. You've got bad decision making. You've got sort of like effectively the ostrich approach. Does anybody here in the room know a guy named Amir Sachs? Amir Sachs with Blue Light IT. He's in Boca Raton in Florida. Anyway, good friend of mine. I met him a few years ago through a program that we're both in. And he said, I have a superpower. What's a superpower? I can make any business owner turn into an ostrich. I'm like, really? How do you do that? And he goes, I walk in the room and say, you're going to get hacked. And he go, whoop, head in the sand. You know what I mean? And now he says with an Israeli accent, which is even better, you're going to get hacked is what he says, But the point is, the point is you will have some people that will not want to talk about it. Sorry, my machine may be freezing here. Dan, am I freezing up on you?
You are. Yeah, it looks like you might be back
Okay.
now.
Bear with me. I have issues with page faults on my computer, and I'm not sure of the source of the problem yet. So bear with me. Hopefully, I'm not under attack, right?
Right.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Can you hear
we
me?
can.
Okay, good. All right. So I can see when my video starts getting a little jagged. But some people, they will never want to have the conversation. Some people, like you said, like Jay talked about his client Peter, who had an attack, who still doesn't get it, who doesn't care. And ultimately, there's going to be something that happens because of their neglect or negligence. And by the way, you know how people say, "Oh, I have cyber insurance. I'll get covered." No, you won't. No, you won't. Your cyber policy will not pay. They will not pay. Oh, why won't they pay? I'm paying my premiums. Well, you know what? Did you ever look at your damn application? Did you look at the application you filled out where you said you have all this crap you're doing? You're not doing any of that. Somebody lied their way through the application, or your broker, your insurance broker, right? They filled it out for you. They rubber stamped it for you. You're not doing those things. They're not going to pay. Insurance companies are not in the business of paying. So let's just forget about that one for a second, because that's not going to happen, right? They're going to deny your claim. And some owners, and again, we're talking about owner level conversations, are not going to go well. They're just not going to get it. And they probably never will because it requires them making a change because they didn't have pain that was large enough or high enough for them to actually implement a change. And think about, oh my God, can't have that happen or happen again. To me, those are the worst potential customers because when it does happen, it is big enough and you haven't disclaimed your reliability from that or even completely detached, you're screwed because they're going to hire a lawyer, the lawyer, or they're going to go to their insurance company, and their insurance company may pay depending on a certain claim. They're going to subrogate. Do you guys know what subrogation is? They're going to subrogate against you, which means they're going to try to claw back funds from you because they may have had to pay out on the lowest likelihood that they did. But the risk to your MSP, in my opinion, is far too great to continue working with them. Okay, so I'll pause there.
What makes it even more frustrating in this particular case of mine with this guy, Peter, all right, it wasn't him that clicked it and wired the money to the wrong guy. It's one of his employees. This guy is probably on the verge of retiring. He doesn't even do that much. So it's not so much that he doesn't want to sit and go through the training. All you got to do is just order everyone to do it.
That's right.
Why not just do that?
Yeah. And that's the bare bones, right?
Yeah.
That's the bare bone basics. Yeah. So, I mean, look, if you have someone who's completely not receptive, we, one of the first things that we do when we have a conversation with the customer, we do, we have a process, right? So we do a first time appointment. We kind of ask very pointed questions about their company, kind of socializing price run. We talk about risk assessment, very high level, roughly what they can expect, but that it's how we can identify where they're holding risk. And in that situation, if they're like, yeah, that's not important to me. And then at that point, I'm like, we're not going to be working together because I will never work with you unless you have somebody managing your risk. That's a decision I've made a long time ago, right?
One thing that you mentioned earlier, in regards to Peter and having a conversation with Peter and sitting down and saying, okay, so if $300,000, it wasn't the threshold that is going to motivate you to jump forward, what is that amount?
Mhm.
I think one of the key things that we need to do is when we ask that question, that just like any other question, like in the sales process, we pause and we work hard not to fill the void,
Yep.
not to start talking, let them think about it. And when there is silence and they're not speaking, they're thinking, let them ponder that and just hold back and wait till they respond.
Right.
Because that works, it works from a perspective of it's getting them thinking. And if you jump right in and start filling that gap and start going down another route, then you've stopped them from thinking and they're
Yeah.
not pondering what they need to really think about.
If
I
you're
think
asking
Norm,
important questions like that, don't, like I said earlier, and Dan, thanks for pointing it out again, don't rescue them. They're asking hard questions because you need them to think and need them to decide on what matters. If you jump in because you feel the void because you're uncomfortable with silence, you better start practicing in this and getting comfortable with that. Because you have to ask hard questions to get people to think. Because again, they want you to challenge them too, maybe not in an overt way, but sort of in a roundabout way. So I appreciate you bringing that back up, Dan.
Norm said in the
The
chat
other
that some just think it's the cost of doing business. I think I think that's kind of accurate because in this particular case, these guys are steel workers. They do a lot of work in New York City, so they're constantly having to pay off union guys and the mob just to be able to work.
Yeah. Oh man, I couldn't imagine.
the other thing that I bring up too is not so much ammo, but realistic things that happen. And once a successful attack happens or there's an entry, then your chances of being like repeated the attacks go much higher. Those successes are basically sold on the dark web, like, hey, these guys paid, so they're we obviously know that they paid, so your chances of being reattacked go much higher.
Much
I'm
higher.
dealing with one of our clients now who had a successful email compromise a year ago, and about every month there is a domain spoof phishing attack on them. And it's like unless you're going to go up and buy all of the domains that look like yours, unfortunately, there's not much we're going to be able to do. I mean, you guys were a successful compromise, and it is what it is. Like, we just have to continue to be aware and be diligent and look out for them. But yeah, if there's a success, I mean, it's going to happen again.
Hey Josh, there is a thing, SendMark, that does DMARC stuff. They have a new service they've added that scans and monitors for similar domains for exactly clients like that where that's happened. I just saw it last week that it's a new offering. So it's not 100%, of course, but it is
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
we use Avanon for advanced email filtering, and it does a really good job of finding those. But we're going through a service model delivery change, and that is included in our new stack. But this client we got to wait for their contract to be up and get them on the new. There's back end stuff, but in the meantime, they can a la carte add it, and they haven't yet. We continually keep telling them to get it on there, but we've even shown them the proof of concept. Like, look, here's the time that it happened in the 2 week period, and it was caught, and it literally shows like spoof domain, it shows like everything you need. So it's a matter of time. But yeah, there is more that they can do other than like look at it. But I know there's also like the marketing piece for that or it like creates a logo or something. Like I don't know if I truly believe
The
that either.
the logo
Well,
thing, I think you're thinking of the BIMI thing,
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, the
yeah.
BIMI,
but
yep.
Yep.
unless somebody's heard, I think the major mail providers, except for Microsoft, are the ones that are supporting it. And for me, that's like almost all my clients are Microsoft. I have a library that, because they're part of a larger system, uses Google, but otherwise it's all Microsoft. So that feature is unavailable to us as far as I'm aware.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that, but I also haven't really dug into BIMI just because I looked at it and I'm like, I don't even know if this is worth pursuing.
I I was looking at it because I'm switching over from EasyDMark to Sunmark and looking at their offerings, and Sunmark has a engineering course they run you through, and it was in there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have heard about it. That was the first time I saw it. So,
Yeah, Powered DMARC has it too. I never
okay.
bothered setting it up for anybody. Because
Yeah,
like I said, it doesn't work in 365. And if somebody's using Gmail, it'll show up stuff there.
yeah,
But
yeah, I try not to support clients that are using Gmail. Like I said, I got the one library and it, it is what it is. But fortunately that part doesn't fall on me if anything happens in that environment, since the organization handles that.
So there was a question from Norm. Do you ever present data to them from other companies that got hit that are in the same industry? Oop, I think Brian for
Looks like Brian froze. I tell clients
I
stories
can,
from around town. I don't name names, but
sure,
yeah,
sure.
all the time. Actually, sometimes I will. I will shame a couple of the banks because they have some terrible practices. But I'll also tell them about the local banks that do have some good things you can put in place, like requiring a wedding signature for wire transfers. I'll tell everyone, call them, tell them you don't want wire transfers unless you have a wedding signature. And I I think for most of us that's reasonable because we're not sending so many that we can't drive a few minutes over to the bank and do that for the amount of money that can be lost over a wire transfer.
but keep in mind, it might not just be, and I did freeze a couple seconds ago there. Keep in mind, it might not just be a wire, it may just be an ACH, right? And we're in main ACH reroute, it could be that too. Wire or financial fraud can happen in a variety of different ways. I mean, you could be a jump off point by which they're getting from you to a vendor of yours or customer of yours through you, right? And it looks legitimate. Like business email compromise is a great way for them to do that. Having your 365 tenant being locked down really tightly and understanding what that means. 365 by default is meant to be usable and convenient, not secure, right? It's not secure by design, unfortunately. But keep in mind that you could be part of a supply chain attack. You're sort of that first jump off point or a second one, who knows? Um, but in the end, I just want to kind of put a finer point on it. I would be careful to not just be having point solution conversations with your clients without giving them the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is doing a proper risk assessment, showing what that means, and giving them the results. Here's where you're vulnerable. Here's what this could mean to you. And if you do all that, and again, have a good process around that and communicate that risk, this is your risk, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, right? You hold that. Here's what could happen to you. We see it all the time. And if they still don't see that, and you're again kind of going and saying, would you just buy, like Jay just said, would you just buy this effectively training program, right? Essentially, sorry, cybersecurity awareness training, CSAT.
yeah.
Would you buy cybersecurity awareness training or whatever else it might be? Buy, application whitelisting, buy Threat Locker. It has to start before that. It has to start at a higher strategic level and showing them what that risk looks like. And if they just don't care or don't think it's going to be them, then you've got to really make a business decision here as to whether you want to be involved. Again, disclaiming your liability, right? Doing the risk acceptance notification, sending that letter, which may not require signature. Talk to your lawyer about that. I'm not an attorney, right? But just be careful about how you proceed. Careful what you say, especially things you put in writing. Don't put like ostentatious claims in writing because that could be used against you later as well. Again, not a lawyer, just play one on TV.
I want to open it up to more questions, but before I do that, I'm going to do a quick commercial break because we have not only one awesome discussion this week about cybersecurity, which is happening as we speak with Brian. We also have an event tomorrow, which we have Matt Lee, the man, Mr. Matt Lee,
Oh, he's
on.
amazing.
He is an awesome guy. He'll be
Yeah.
speaking tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time. We have a webinar, which is stop checking boxes and start filling gaps or fixing gaps. And so I did throw a link into that. So Matt Lee with Pax8, as well as Mike Anderson from Easy DMark. So there is a link there. That's tomorrow. Feel free to join us. With that being said, let's open it up to more questions. Who has a burning question that they'd like to get answered here?
Ryan,
Yes.
Go,
Voice
Barb.
from God. Is this you?
Ryan, Ryan, repent. So
I do all the time. Just ask my wife. Go
the
ahead, Norm.
you say all the right things. How do you come across as not just another guy trying to sell them something?
That's the trick, right? I think by prefacing by saying, listen, I'm going to talk to you about some things that are going to be really hard to hear. If you preface the conversation with, look, I need to have a really serious conversation with you, and it's going to be as hard for me as it is for you. And you kind of disarm them a little bit and make yourself a little vulnerable and say, I've been struggling about how to present this to you. And this is not contrived. I mean, you may really be struggling, but I'm really worried about you. And here's why. And I need to talk to you about some things that are really, really important about your business that I think I haven't been able to convey to you yet. Can we talk about that? If you approach it that way, make yourself vulnerable and say, look, this is a very serious, honest, open conversation. How I want to help you. They should be disarmed enough and not take what you say after that as being an attack or being fodder for them getting pissed off or whatever, right? Or trying to be salesy, essentially. At the end of the day, you've got to communicate. Part of my job is to convey to you what risk you have in your business. And if I can't convey that, but that's how I would kick it off. Does that help? I do believe this is me as a person talking about, Dan, you talked about character earlier. Part of my belief in life is that vulnerability is the key, one of the keys to deeper connection, meaningful connection. I'm kind of telling you it's a little bit, it's not like, California tree hugger woo-woo shit. It's actually been proven. It's true. But that's just intuitively who I am, right? That's who I am. And not everyone's like that, right? Most people are drawn to this industry because they're kind of introverted. They want to sit behind a keyboard. They want to make decisions. And they may not be as comfortable in opening themselves up. But if you make yourself a little more vulnerable and say, look, I'm here to help you. I'm here to show you the light and help you understand and where I'm worried about you, because you can't be worried about them and them not be worried about your business. Think about that. That is crucial. If you're worried more about their business than they are, you have a problem. That's a major disconnect. And that has to come up in that conversation. You've got to have a heart to heart with them.
And those are truly difficult conversations that, if we go back 10, 15, 20 years ago and more, that we weren't having. And, I think for multiple reasons. One, obviously, cybersecurity has come to the forefront. If we go back 20 years ago, we weren't having these same type of conversations. Or if we did, they were significantly much more different. However,
I remember when viruses had to propagate through floppy disks.
right,
Sneaking it around, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other thing too is I think at that time had this mindset that we're crossing a line. Like this is not, we shouldn't be talking to them about this. We shouldn't be having these business conversations because we felt as if it was none of our business, but it is our business.
Yep.
And so I think we need to really get our mind wrapped around that if you feel uncomfortable having a conversation about cybersecurity and the impact to their business, that is 100% okay, and that's what we should be doing. And the more you have those conversations, the easier they become, and you learn from each of those conversations. And before too long, you're going to look back and think, why was I ever worried about having these conversations, and B, you're going to forget that you even, it was just ever a topic that you felt like you had to address, and you're going to push forward and push through it and not even realize that you're having it.
Yeah, I think you're going to thank yourself, and honestly, even better, I think your client is going to thank you after you have that conversation. Again, if they're still like, again, heart to heart, really breaking it down, saying, look, forget about all this other stuff, all the things that we're talking about, all the widgets and gadgets and all that stuff. Forget about that. Just leave that aside. I'm worried about your risk because things have changed. Cyber attacks are way up, and your risk is massive, and you need to know about that.
And we should not be afraid that if we're pushing, and again, it's always tactful, but we should never be afraid that if we're pushing the conversation the way that we should, that we're going to lose an account, that they're going to be upset. Because at the end of the day, if they're not embracing it, then we probably should lose that customer. But we should never feel like, wow, if I push them too hard, they might want to look elsewhere. Well, that might be a blessing in disguise.
I agree 100% because that could be just the thing that sinks you by osmosis or by affiliation later, right? When, not if it happens. You've probably heard the phrase because it's used a lot in the industry, which is you're not too small to get hacked. You're just too small to make the news because they're not hearing about it going on, because they're not hearing about their contemporaries and their competitors getting popped because it doesn't make the news. It's not Target or Home Depot or, in recent CMMC history, Georgia Tech getting a False Claims Act lawsuit by the DOJ. Stuff like that. You don't hear about that in the news these days. You only hear about the big things, and they just get it passed because they can survive the breach and they can survive the fines, right, all those things that come with it, the regulatory pressure and the weight that comes down on them. They can deal with it because they're billion-dollar firms. You've heard of them, right? But
The other part of that, though, is that if you do get hacked, it's not something you're going to advertise.
That's right, because there's shame
So
associated with that.
a lot of this stuff is happening and people don't
Yeah.
realize it because the company tries to, just sweep it under the rug.
And
Right.
they're trying their best to not communicate that if they don't have to the customers, but their breach notification laws in nearly every state, right? There's not federal breach notification laws, and we need that badly because we need to bring it together, right? But that ain't happening anytime soon. But the reality is that a lot of them they're trying to figure out, okay, something really, really bad happened, whether it was ransomware, whether it's data exfil, whatever it might have been, that has a potentially high level reputational damage component to their company, and they probably will not survive it if they go through all the steps needed to actually go through the incident response process, right? Including defer data forensics and investigation and all that stuff, and doing those processes, going through it, notifying their customers. They also are hopefully being assisted by a breach coach, potentially through their insurance company or a third party. But all those things are happening all the time, and you never hear about them because they're not being reported upon. These are sort of the dark unknown numbers, right? We don't know what they are. They're living in the shadows. But it happens, we all know it happens every day.
So, Brian, as we're wrapping up here, you had mentioned earlier that Exceed, your organization can help MSPs on the cybersecurity side. Could you elaborate, what are some ways that your organization could assist MSPs from that perspective?
Sure. Yeah. Generally, the most ways that we do is we do compliance related work, but let's just talk about the cyber side itself. Let's put compliance aside for a second. Let's assume you don't have a mature risk assessment and risk management program in your MSP. You're like, I maybe know about this or these two or three point solutions I can do, and you want to partner with someone like us. We can have that conversation and have a very clear understanding of what we would provide, right? Doing a risk assessment, conveying that to the customer. They say, you know what? The customer says, all right, well, we're willing to do that. We're willing to pay for it to do a risk assessment because we do charge for it. This is not free, right? And then communicating that risk. And we can then be the MSSP that works inside your MSP and does things that, that your MSP may not be comfortable doing. I'm not saying you're not, you probably are, but if that were the case, we were happy to partner with you because honestly, one of the reasons I got out of managing IT is because it's a pain, it's a lot of work. Do you guys agree?
Right.
It's a ton of work, right? And I would rather be in the security side and just and have a very clear, does anyone know what an SRM is? A shared responsibility matrix? Heard that term before, right? You tend to have that if you're dealing with somebody that is, but I'd say in this case, we're potentially managing your client's risk for you, right? So we would have a responsibility around certain components of their infrastructure, their risk management, and then there would be the MSP that would manage their technical side, right? The computers, help desk, warranties, replacements, email, all those things, right? Network, RACI, exactly, right? Which is responsible, accountable, consultant, and informed, right? It's part of the RACI model that's learned under ITIL. I did ITIL foundations years ago, so I remember that. But that's an important piece of it. So they are responsible. Keep this in mind. I'll just close with this. The customer is responsible for their risk. They are. But if you don't do anything about helping them manage it, when it blows up, not if, but when it blows up, you will be in that blast radius. I said it before. It's worth repeating. You're going to be in it. How bad that's going to be is TBD. Don't let it happen to you.
And this is something that you could leverage, exceed, more on a client by client basis, right? So if you have specific clients that fall into very specific government regulations and compliance requirements, then it's not like an MSP has to bring you in for all of their clients necessarily, but it could be client specific that you really need to take some hold of their cybersecurity.
Yeah. And so, for example, I mean, another one, let's talk about the compliance side of the house, right? Which is not necessarily touching keyboards or deploying tools. It's more about building their compliance program. So if you have a defense contractor customer that has to be CMMC certified or has controlled unclassified information, which they have to safeguard, which you may or may not even know about, right? They've never even talked to you about it potentially. But if that's the case, talk to them about that. We partner with MSPs all the time where we have a program that makes sure that we do the compliance piece and we make you look good, right? We even bring you work. We bring you project work, make sure that your MR is going to go up as well. That's all part of what we do and not stepping on your toes because we don't do that.
How much information do you have to gather up before you can do pricing? Like, let's say we go to a client and we fit that model that you're describing where we don't have the expertise in-house. And so we go to a client and we're like, okay, would be a good fit. How much information do we have to feed to you before? Can you give them a quote and say, hey, for this much, we'll do this assessment? And, we just tell you they got 10 users that are all using Office 365 and you're good to go? Or do you need to gather up more?
Yeah. So if it's a risk assessment, if you want to work with somebody to help you with what's called managed security program, which we can do again alongside the MSP as an MSSP, we can do that. And we do charge for risk assessments. So it's somewhere between about $2K for about 10 users and kind of goes up from there. We have the initial conversation with you because we want to be sure that we're, again, working together, not separate, not working against each other. And then we have a conversation with the customer and then we talk about risk and say, well, they have to have enough of an interest to want to identify the risk, enough to where they're willing to pay for it to learn about what that is. Because I found, I mean, honestly, they have to have skin in the game. If they don't pay for these assessments, they will not value it.
Oh, yeah.
100%. So
people
that's
don't value what they don't pay for.
Exactly. So, I mean, we've all done back in the day, the rapid fire tool stuff. We would present them with a reams of paper of say, see all this crap. They're like, I don't care. Right. Because they didn't pay for it. They didn't see there wasn't any risk associated to them. Right. And then also they didn't take it seriously. So I know we're at time. So
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Awesome. Brian, always thank you so much for your time and knowledge.
Sure.
I want to thank you for being here as well as thank everyone else for being here. Just a reminder, we do have our event tomorrow that I threw that link into chat, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And also we have our MSP discussion group on Friday. You can learn all about all the different programs that we have available at everythingmsp.com. Go under the resources tab. With that being said, I want to thank everybody for being here. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to everybody soon. Take care,
Thanks for
everybody.
having me.
So long, boys.
Bye. See you.
Thank you. Bye now.